What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast, episode 23. Today, I just want to get into a couple things I've been thinking about with all this propaganda and this war in the Middle East that they're inevitably trying to drag us into, obviously. The funding's not going to be enough. Just get that out of your head. They will, of course, ask us for unlimited amounts of tax dollars, just like in Ukraine. But if this escalates anymore, for sure, they'll want our own military engagement. And we already have aircraft carriers, destroyers over there. And not for no reason. I don't believe it's for no reason. But hopefully it's not for the reasoning the deep state would like us to be there for. I still have a glimmer of hope that we are not going to engage this biblical war, and we're not going to go gung-ho after Iran. Although that has clearly been the plan for a long time. War between Israel, us, and Iran. And there's plenty of evidence and plenty of testimony from plenty of people well high enough into the government to surely know that that was part of the plan. What do you believe, and does it matter? I believe it 100% does matter. Not only what they believe in Israel, they believe in Iran, they believe across the world, but what we all believe. Ideology in itself, it stirs our beliefs and our thoughts and our emotions in such drastic ways. I was completely overwhelmed by the story of this woman in Europe. It was Germany, I believe. She was gang raped by seven people. And when the police report was being done, she refused to actually call them what they were: Muslims, dark-skinned Muslims. And, most likely they had just immigrated in recent times to her country. And she was afraid to tell the truth about the situation because she didn't want to spawn negative beliefs about immigrants. Because her ideology, because her teachings and the ideology that she had adapted to was so strong against racism. And it's propaganda, 100%, to get you to believe such things in the first place, but much less do so against sane logic and against reasoning. Like, she actually lied and said it was white Germans until the police did the search, did the investigation, and came back to her and said, this isn't adding up. It's not really feasible. And she explained to them why she had lied. There was another situation, I believe it was New York City. It was a boyfriend and girlfriend sitting on a bench, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, or something like that, and someone had slit the throat of this young man. And when the police were interviewing the woman, she actually refused to give the race of the person because of systemic racism, and she didn't want to contribute to negative beliefs about another race because she was so damn brainwashed that she believed that was the right thing to do. This is absolutely insanity, but it's proof that your beliefs matter. An argument I had heard once upon a time about atheism and Christianity and Buddhism and other religions was, it doesn't really matter what you believe if the majority believes fervently in another direction or in some direction, because that will make things in your immediate circles and in your living, in your life, in your social circumstances real. If the majority of people here in the United States were atheist or believed that there was no reason for a moral compass, it would be chaos, absolute chaos. There would be no justice. And I believe that the wheels of justice fall off in places where people are steered towards believing or having an ideology that would insinuate it's all chance and it doesn't really, life doesn't really have consequences or meaning. Think about that. If you have no reason to live, if you have no purpose for being here, if you have no belief system that will help guide you or dictate you should aim to be better or be a good person in itself, well, times will be tough. It will be chaotic. So what about the Middle East now? In the last couple of weeks, we've seen so many things hit the media and the public airwaves that were atrocious. We talked about it in the last podcast. Atrocity propaganda. And there's going to be propaganda in war. This information / misinformation war is not going to slow down. I believe it'll escalate. And there's always going to be things that we need to sit back, have some discernment and some patience with, because the consequences of not are greater than the story in itself. So yes, it is awful if there are victims of war crimes. And there are always victims of war crimes in war. No side is perfect. There is no perfectly fought war without innocent civilian casualties. However, a majority of people across the world, or in the West specifically, believing atrocity propaganda is worse than the lives lost in a lot of ways. Because we will inspire or support or endorse heinous, crazy escalation. When Obama got into office, everybody thought he was going to be a president of priest, but they ended up giving him a nickname years after, or even during his presidency, the drone commander-in-chief, because he was committing murders with the drone strikes. After 9/11, we saw it with Bush. He completely justified going into Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction that proved not to exist. Just the mere statement that there was testimony that Saddam was doing his best to build weapons of mass destruction was enough to get us to go in there and murder and slaughter innocent civilians by the thousand. You have to understand that these are criminal acts. These are acts of war. This is, no matter what the information fed to us through the media were to be, there is no justification for it. There is no justification for an endless onslaught of bombing in an area known to house people that have absolutely nothing to do with the conflict. And to make the statement that everybody in a country is responsible for conflict or is in some way, shape, or form to be held liable, that is just absolute nonsense. Think about the innocent women and children in Gaza and in Israel. To think that there's not going to be innocent lives lost on both sides of that border is irrational. It's irrational. It's not based on logic. So what we believe about these things, I believe, carries such a great deal of importance. A great deal of importance. We can't be the justification for war or for war crimes or the loss of innocent lives. How many of us really just wish to live our lives and have some abundance and some freedom and be left alone? I would dare say the majority of us do. Even if we're living lives, sheltered lives in comfort, I would venture to say that we would be better off without the interference of media and propaganda and news and updates about what's going on in the rest of the world, especially if we're not there to confirm them, if fact versus fiction. But to have our emotions played with and to be toyed with by stories, by visual references. Look, there was plenty of evidence in the last couple of weeks that some of these things were staged, and they showed photos and behind the scenes shots of, both in Palestine and Israel, propaganda being made. So how can we believe these things? And the people that are believing them right away, please, rushing out there to have your emotions played with that way and to be so afflicted by the imagery is bad for you. It's bad for you. It's not good for you. And it's certainly not good for anybody abroad when the consequences come into play that our government's going to step in. And an eye for an eye will leave us all blind, the entire world blind. If you think about that statement, what in our lifetimes, and especially I'm talking about wars, has been justified? A lot of banker wars is what's gone on. A lot of people that tried to move off the dollar were killed and had their countries thrown into turmoil, into absolute turmoil. Gaddafi, a good example. What Gaddafi was doing for his people, if you go, especially now, and find out before he was assassinated, before he was murdered, the state that his own populace was in compared to where they're at now. The slave trade intensified and was completely multiplied after the coup. And that was an American / Western intelligence coup. No doubt about it. This man was murdered. He was assassinated because he dared to do the best thing for his people that he could. That's not debatable anymore. When you heard Hillary talk about it, we came, we saw, he died. Oh my God, gut-wrenching. Absolute gut-wrenching. So Herzog in Israel this past week said something about all of the Palestinians being responsible, that there were no innocent people in Palestine because they should have gotten rid of Hamas, or they shouldn't. They could have uprised. They should not have supported, and so they're all being held responsible. Think about that for a minute. If you believe that a 7-year-old boy or girl or a woman who's just trying to feed them in the absolute most poverty-stricken place you can imagine is responsible for what Hamas is doing and terrorists are doing, well then every U.S. citizen is responsible for what our own government has done abroad and every unjustified action that they've taken in our entire lifetimes. And I just don't believe that. And I just don't believe every Palestinian is responsible for the actions of Hamas or terrorists. And I do not believe every Israeli is responsible for the actions of their government or the deep state or anybody else who acts in the name of the Zionist policies and this expansion. I refuse to believe that they are all evil and all responsible. Now, are their ideologies different than ours, and are their ideologies perhaps twisted? Maybe, and I would assume so. I would assume that both sides of that border have ideological issues, and that's a great way to put it. There's just a lot of issues at play, and if you were raised in the same environment, we would have issues to deal with as well, very similar. Our issues here are far different than what they are in the rest of the world. You don't have to go far from the U.S. south of our border. You don't have to go far around the world at all to have conditions that would have made us completely different people across the board. If you grew up in hard times, not only are you going to be, well, you're going to be a different person, but not only are you going to be a different person, your ideas, your beliefs are going to be different. Your beliefs about the world would be so much different if you couldn't just go to Starbucks every day and then go to a job that pays you well and sit in the air conditioning and be conditioned to an easy life. And if you think your life is that hard here, well, again, you have not been abroad, or you have not really paid attention to some of your neighbors even here. Most people, if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, you already have a one up on a lot of the world. Let's be real. Let's be honest. It's a great thing to take for granted, but most of us do take it for granted that we wake up every day in a comfortable bed, that we go out and we can make choices that are luxurious compared to most of the world. So for us to buy any of the news or the media's messaging and then respond to it the way I've seen online, and the way I hear people talking about this is, it's brutal. It's mind-boggling, and it's disturbing. It's disturbing. I'm right back to 9/11, which we were all abhorrently pissed off and angry that 9/11 happened. We were so angry that we actually bought hook, line, and sinker a story that did not make any sense. And plenty of people at the time were saying it does not make any sense. This is not something that took 20 years to unravel. There was plenty of people in New York City who were offering testimony that was far different than what we were being fed across national news. So, why did we buy it hook, line, and sinker? Why did we support it so fervently? We believed something that got us into an emotional state where we justified retribution and absolute heinous action. And that's all we can call war anymore, people. Heinous action. Whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in China with Taiwan. Enough is enough with war. No? We need to hold the people responsible that have gotten us here. The media is a big and a fundamental problem, and a big problem, and a big tool of those who profit the most off of this. The war machine, the bankers, the people that profit the most off of war use the media. It's obvious. Just like Hollywood is used to distract us, to perhaps desensitize us, to brainwash us, to render us, well, pretty useless in the grand scheme of things. If you're just a feeder, and that's what you do, is you consume Hollywood and you consume everything that you can get your hands on, and that's all you are, as a consumption machine, what good are you to the world? What are you giving back, really? And, maybe your ideology, maybe your belief system is, potentially granting you that laziness, that wish. And perhaps a lot of us need ideological overhaul. We need to reassert, some logic into our rational everyday. If we're aiming to be better people and we're aiming to correct the problems that we have in our own lives, well, I think we will disseminate information a lot better. We'll most definitely analyze and interpret a lot better, at least if we're trying to produce some results, both in ourselves and in our immediate circles, our communities. There's a saying, I forget who I heard it say online, but it was, those that are actually doing better than you will not be criticizing you. And then you go online and you pay attention to the people that are criticizing the heck out of everybody and the heck out of everything. And then the people that are calling for retribution and war. These people are not doing good. These people are not doing great. These people are not succeeding in life. They can't be. Their emotions are upside down. They're mouth breathers. They're going from A to B every day, out of control. If they're not in control of their own physiology, I don't really trust them to make decisions for me, especially something like going to war. And most people are walking around mouth breathing, out of control, letting their emotions steer them throughout all of their decision making. It's unfortunate and it's sad, but it's the reality. People are filling themselves with poisons every day and allowing the programmers to program them to be the most useless and most manipulatable, yeah, I guess maybe that's a word, people. Stop being manipulated. Stop allowing anything and everything that comes across Instagram to trigger you to the point where you actually make the most irrational decisions and the most irrational statements and illogical things, and you portray them as a moral high ground. social justice warriors. You're fighting for a cause that does not exist most of the time. The last time I spoke to you guys, I was talking about propaganda, and just when you thought the public was catching on to it, there's something that comes across the airwaves that completely disproves that notion. Absolutely mind-boggling how many people just are in an emotional uproar for the last couple of weeks. And a lot of them are actually ignoring the reality that what they were upset about in the first place was false or based on falsehood or was complete and total propaganda made to do just that. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to turn the TV off. And I know Instagram and all the other social media feeds are full of it as well. Maybe we need to, stop polluting ourselves with sources that are not credible across the board, wherever it may be. And if we did focus a little bit more on ourselves and on our immediate circles and our communities, we'd all be better off for sure. So maybe that's what I'd like to say the most today. I will do all I can to focus on myself, make myself a better person, do what I can do in the situations I can control to make the world a better place. It starts right here. It starts with me. I know that. I look in the mirror every day. I wake up every day and I think about the tasks that I have to perform. And as many times as possible for myself, how can I make myself a better person? Right now, I'm going to go learn how to groom horses. I hadn't done that. And the potential for me to be able to do that for some horses and some people that will need that is there. It's kind of floating in my world right now. So I thought, yeah, why not? I'm going to go take this course. I'm going to go get hands-on with a horse and learn something new today. I mean, why not? That's what brought me to YouTube in the first place is I had quit drinking and I thought like, yeah, you know what? I've had this time that I've wasted in bars and in the scene, trying to satisfy myself and comfort myself. And I don't want to spend any of that time or this life resource doing that anymore. So I went and found those lectures and found subjects where I could learn things. And learning by video is cool. You can learn a lot of things on YouTube, a plethora of things on YouTube. But you can also learn online or in person these things. And there is no actual limit to the task that you should be able to skill yourself in. Why? Why limit yourself? Why do one job? I am like borderline Forrest Gump in that way, that I've done so many different things. So many different things. And if something comes up that interests me and I need to acquire some skill set for it, boom, I'm on it. I'm on it. If I focus on, attaining more skills for myself, well, I'm not doing something irrational that's hurting somebody else on the other side of the world, at least. Let's chalk that up to at least that's what I'm not doing. I know that there's innocent people all over the world who are struggling and who have been dictated terms by people above them or in control of their country or their state or their city or the communities where they live. It's beyond their control and are suffering. Today I'm going to think about them. I'm not going to think about these countries that will take an infinite amount of tax dollars and war among each other for whatever reasons, if none other than profit. Anyways, this has been an interesting one, and I'm going to go work with a horse. I'll tell you guys what I learned next time. Josh Button Podcast. Thanks for joining me. I'll talk to you all soon.